All right, it's 8:30, so we'll go ahead and get started. My name is Tina Quigley, and I am excited. I'm the chair of the DRI, the Desert Research Institute Foundation, and I am excited to be hosting this very first Conversations with DRI Innovators, and we'll talk a little bit more about what that means. In the next 60 minutes, we'll explore how Nevada-based scientists at DRI, Desert Research Institute, are identifying real-world questions and solving them with real-world answers. We'll be talking about the questions such as, and these are fun topics, such as how is a dog's nose helping solve crimes and recover human bodies on land? Well, we all know they can do it on land, right? And especially in airports, we've all seen those movies, but also how this might be able to happen underwater. Very valuable in recovering bodies, right? And other things. How one popular household appliance could be unleashing a common pollutant into the air that we breathe. Now, I already know what it is because I've seen the presentation, but I gotta tell you, it was kind of this moment of, never thought of that. And then we'll also talk more about how weather and climate have the potential to affect our water resources and what we can do about it. And we all know that weather and climate affect our water resources, but we're going to learn about how technology and logistics and algorithms can help us understand more the history and the nature of these storms and these droughts, and how we can predict and track them as well. So technology, algorithms, just a great agenda ahead. Before we go into our speakers, though, I want to tell you a little bit about DRI, because a lot of times people don't understand what DRI is, and admittedly, it took me a while to understand as well. So DRI is an institute that's been around for 60 years, and I know that that might sound like a long time to some of you, to some of us it doesn't. But really in the lifespan of an academic institute or a research institute, it's not that long. And what's amazing about it is that it's gone from, in those 60 years, it was created in 1959, from it was created by Nevada State Legislature, just a small handful of kind of vision-oriented scientists just here in Nevada. It's grown from that in 60 years to what it is now, where it's got I think it's over 400 scientists associated with DRI, pretty much on every continent, doing atmospheric sciences, hydrological sciences, earth and ecosystem sciences. And it's really a well-known institute. In fact, we joke sometimes that it's more known globally than it is locally, but it's something that here in Nevada, we need to be proud of. And so thank you for joining us today and letting us spread the message. There's one more thing I want to make really, really clear about DRI, is that unlike other academic institutes, so even though it is an institute much like UNLV or UNR or the state colleges that report to the Nevada system of higher education, to the Board of Regents, it is different in that it doesn't have alumni, and also the scientists and the faculty are non-tenured, and they are responsible for their own salaries through grants and contracts. So basically, they are entrepreneurs who go out and find those who want to sponsor the science or the problems that they are looking to solve. So again, they are entrepreneurs, which brings me to what the IRP is. And these scientists you're going to hear from today were grant recipients of the foundations, so the DRI Foundation's Innovative Research Program, our grant program. And what it does is that the foundation's money is allocated in small pots to maybe $30,000 to scientists who just need that start so that they can start to kind of collect the data and produce the initial results that will help them build the scientific case to go out and solicit larger grants from government, from National Weather Service, from contractors, from businesses who would be interested in that science. So it's kind of fun. I'm very, very proud to be a part of this program, because these little tiny seed grants possibly are going to be the beginning of solving some very large issues for us, or possibly being spun off into some type of intellectual property that then a corporate America or so business will pick up and commercialize and start to solve some of the world's problems as well. So that's my pitch, and I really hope that you get something out of this today and are intrigued to learn more and maybe contribute to the foundation or the IRP, or get involved in the foundation. All right, so let's move on to why you're here, and that is to hear from our speakers. What do our clothes dryers, a dog's nose, and storm clouds in our mountains all have in common? Well, you're going to be hearing about all of them today. That's what they have in common. These are all issues that have been researched through the IRP program. We're going to hear from 4 scientists that are grant recipients of the research program. And we'll have, so to let you know who those 4 are, we've got Dr. Mary Cable, who's looking at how dogs, like I mentioned, can help recover bodies on land, and how her research is expanding into how dogs may be able to find cadavers under the water too. Finding and recovering bodies is, of course, important during accidental drownings. We'll have Dr. Dan McAvoy, who'll look at a topic near and dear to our heart, to all of our hearts, and that's snow and its relation to water. He'll talk to us about what he calls snow drought and the real online tool that he is developing to track it all. So it's a real-time online tool using algorithms, and he'll share with us what he's doing in that area. And then we'll dive into the chemistry of snow. So we've got 2 snow-related presentations today. Dr. Nathan Chalom is studying the characteristics behind snow that falls from specific storm patterns. So different snows come from different storms and different storm patterns. We all know that too little rain can impact our water resources, but also too much of a good thing can have catastrophic consequences as well. So we'll learn more about the science and what he's learning about that. And so, but first, we're going to kickstart our program today with Dr. Monica Arienzo, who is Assistant Research Professor with the DRI Division of Hydrologic Sciences, and she's a National Science Foundation grant recipient for her work in microplastics. And she'll explain she'll shed some light on microplastics in Lake Tahoe, the Las Vegas Wash, and other waterways, and a new direction her studies and research have taken since she took this on and when she received the innovative research program money. And she'll talk to us about why should we care about microplastics. So with that, I am going to go ahead and turn it over to Monica. Monica, are you ready?
All right, thank you, Tina, for that wonderful introduction. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen now.
Okay.
All right, can you see my screen? We good?
Yes, we can.
Excellent. Thank you, Tina, for that wonderful introduction. My name is Monica Arienzo, and I'm an assistant research professor at the Desert Research Institute. And today I'm going to be telling you all a little bit about some of the work we've been doing on microplastics at DRI. First, you may be wondering, what are microplastics? Microplastics are small plastic particles that are less than 1/4 of an inch. So you can see here this photo taken by Amanda Height, where she had collected some microplastics on the beach up in Lake Tahoe. And you can see in her hand, she's holding some of those microplastics with the beautiful Lake Tahoe in the background. And so these plastic particles are less than 1/4 of an inch, which is about the size of a pencil eraser. The smallest microplastics we study are 0.00003 of an inch. That's pretty small. We can't see that with the naked eye. We actually need a microscope in order to see plastics that small. To give you a better idea of how small that is, 0.00003 of an inch, let's think about one of our hairs. So if we look at one of our hairs and we look at the width of our hair, and if we take the width of our hair and we magnify it to be the size of this gray circle shown here. So this is the width of our hair magnified. The smallest plastics we study are this little red dot here. So these are really small compared to one of our hairs. And so when we study plastics, and when we study microplastics, some of them we can see with our naked eye, and some we need a microscope in order to see. So this makes it really interesting when we study microplastics. You may be wondering why we should study microplastics. So far, the scientific community has found microplastics all over the globe. We found them in the deep ocean, and the community has also found them in the polar environments. But there's still a lot we don't know about microplastics. Some of the questions we still don't know is, where are they in the environment? Where are they coming from, and where are they going? Do they harm animals or the environment? And so these are really important questions when we're studying something that's new and that we still don't quite understand. And so here at DRI, we have been trying to tackle these important questions. We've been doing this by assembling a diverse research team of DRI researchers. And we've also been bringing in students into our research team. We've been developing a state-of-the-art laboratory at DRI dedicated to the study of microplastics. We've been conducting research in Lake Tahoe and the Las Vegas Wash. And lastly, we've been trying to develop science-informed solutions to the issue of microplastics. And so now I'm going to tell you a little bit more about each of these steps we've been taking to tackle these questions. So when we first received IRP funding, we were a team of 3, and we've since grown our team to this diverse team of scientists. We all come from different scientific backgrounds, which is really fun and exciting to work in this collaborative team all together. We wanted to assemble a diverse team because studying microplastics is going to require a lot of different scientific backgrounds in order to tackle these problems. And so we wanted to make sure we had scientists who had backgrounds in education, as well as scientists who had backgrounds in biology, so we could all come together and work together on this question. In addition to assembling a team of researchers, we've also been dedicated to the education of the next generation of scientists. Julia and Erica are 2 UNR students who work with me in the lab. These students take on their own research projects in the lab, and then they are able to come not only in the lab, but also get experience in the field, collecting their own samples, asking their own questions about those samples. And then they can go on and present those results to their peers and to the greater scientific community. It's been really fun watching these students grow and become scientists. In addition to building this diverse team of researchers, we've also been building the infrastructure at DRI to have a state-of-the-art laboratory focused on microplastics. We were able to leverage IRP funds to acquire an infrared microscope. So we were able to use the initial data we got from the IRP funding to write a grant to the National Science Foundation, and we were awarded that grant to purchase this instrument. So you can see the selfie of me here in the lab just a couple of weeks ago when we received our new instrument, and the instrument is behind me in the background. This instrument is unique. There are very few of these instruments in the US that are dedicated to the study of microplastics. And the reason why we are so excited to have this instrument in our lab is that we are able to use this instrument to identify plastic type. So we can tell what kinds of plastics are in our samples. And this is really important for trying to address some of those questions, like where are these plastics coming from? And I'm going to be showing you a little bit of some of the data we've been getting from this new instrument. And so now I'm going to show you some preliminary scientific findings from our studies. This work is preliminary, so it is just still in the beginning of the work that we have planned to do here. The first site I want to tell you about is Lake Tahoe. Lake Tahoe is located up here in northern Nevada, along the border of California and Nevada. And this lake is really important because it serves as an important drinking water resource for the communities around Lake Tahoe and those communities downstream in Reno and Sparks. You can see in the 6 yellow dots are the sites that we've been studying. And what we did is we went to these sites and we collected water from Lake Tahoe, and then we analyzed the water for plastics to understand what plastics are in our water. And so some of our findings so far have been that we've identified in the Lake Tahoe water microplastics that are made up of polypropylene, And so these polypropylene are things like children's toys, takeout containers, and some textiles like carpets. These are made up of polypropylene. We've also identified rayon in our samples. So this is a common textile material, right? Much of our clothing is comprised of plastics. We've also been studying, we also found polycarbonate in our samples. These days we see this as those sneeze guards in many of the places we visit, but it's also found in CDs or DVDs, as well as in goggles. And lastly, we identified polyethylene. This polyethylene makes up things like plastic bags, water bottles, and some building materials. And so these preliminary results from Lake Tahoe suggest a variety of microplastic sources to the lake. We still have more work to do to quantify exactly how much of each of these plastics we have, but this is a very interesting initial finding. So now let's move on and talk about another research location that we've been studying, the Las Vegas Wash. The Las Vegas Wash drains from Las Vegas into Lake Mead. And we wanted to study the Las Vegas Wash because Lake Mead is an important drinking water resource for Las Vegas. Again, you can see the yellow dots that indicate the 5 sites along the Las Vegas Wash that we sampled for microplastics. Similar to what we did in Lake Tahoe, we collected the water from these 5 locations and then analyzed them for microplastics. And using our new instrument, we were able to identify the types of plastics in our samples. And so what we have found so far is similar to Lake Tahoe. We identified polypropylene in our samples. Again, that's the children's toys and the takeout containers and carpets and things like that. We also identified nylon. Nylon is very common in clothing and textile materials. And we also identified polyester, another common textile material. And so when we compare these 2 locations, Lake Tahoe in northern Nevada and the Las Vegas Wash in southern Nevada, 2 pretty different locations when we think about how the land around these areas is being used, we are pretty surprised to find that at both locations, we identified clothing sourced plastics. And so this led to us scratching our heads and wondering, why are we finding clothing sourced plastics at both of these places that are so different? And this led us to think of this question: do dryers vent microplastics into the environment? So we all dry our clothing using our dryers. Maybe some of us hang dry our clothes, but for the most part, most households wind up using a dryer to dry their clothing. And is it possible that this is a source of these clothing sourced plastics to the environment? So we set out to answer this question. So when you have your dryer in your house, that hot air that's inside your dryer is vented outside of your house. So there's this tube that comes out of your dryer and then vents on the outside. That hot air may contain microplastics. And so we wanted to study this to understand if that hot air that comes out of our dryers contains microplastics. And so what we did was we decided to take a citizen science approach to studying this. What that means is we got 8 volunteers to help us study if microplastics were being emitted from their dryers. And so what we did was we built this little, what we call our lint catcher, this little fine mesh that sits on the outside of the house, right over that vent. And that mesh catches whatever comes out of that vent. We asked our citizen scientists to put this on their dryer vent and keep this on the outside of their house for 1 month and record during that month what they were drying. After that month, they folded up the mesh and they mailed it back to DRI, where we've been in the process of analyzing it to understand what did that mesh catch? Did it catch microplastics, Or did it mostly catch things like cotton and wool? And so we're still in the process of figuring this out. So we're still analyzing these samples. But one thing that's really exciting is if we find that these dryers are in fact emitting plastics, this is an example of a science-informed solution that we could then use on other households to help reduce microplastics in the environment. And so this is a wonderful example of potentially a way that we can use our science to help reduce microplastic emissions from something like a dryer. So we're still working on this. So keep your eye on our website to see more about this project, because we're really excited about it and we're really interested to see what we find. And so in summary, today I've told you a little bit about how we've assembled this amazing research team of diverse scientists and students at DRI. We've been building a state-of-the-art laboratory dedicated to the study of microplastics. And we've been conducting research in Lake Tahoe and the Las Vegas Wash. And we're developing a science-informed solution to the issue of microplastics. And so with that, thank you, and happy to take any questions, Tina.
You know what, we'll go ahead and hold off on questions till the end, Monica, because, and I know I've got some questions for you, but we'll go ahead and get all the way through and then come back. I want to say thank you so much. And I love that there's intrigue associated with the dryers. It's kind of, if you think about it, it is kind of a, well, yeah, duh, there's got to be something coming out of there. But I just think it's monumental that you posed the question and you're studying it. So thanks so much.
Thank you.
All right, we next go to Dr. Daniel McAvoy, who is Assistant Research Professor of Climatology at the DRI Atmospheric Sciences Division. So he's got his head in the clouds. He is also a researcher with the Western Regional Climate Center and a National Weather Service grant recipient. His presentation is going to cover how tracking snow droughts in a warmer climate as a tool will help us understand the need for changing water resource management strategies. So with that, Dr. McAvoy, can I turn it over to you?
Well, great. And thank you for the introduction, Tina. And I'm happy to be here this morning. I'm going to get my screen going here. And get started. So, all right. So as Tina mentioned, I'm going to be talking about a concept called snow drought today and a tool that we've developed to track these snow droughts. And so this idea of snow drought is really important to anyone, not just people who love snow, but really anyone who uses fresh water on a daily basis. And so whether you're a skier or a water manager or a ski resort manager or someone who just turns on their tap and expects fresh water to come out, you should be really interested in this subject. And so this picture, or my cover photo here, is from a recent snow drought year locally here around Lake Tahoe in 2017. And you can see around the shore of Lake Tahoe, this is right after Christmas, there's hardly any snow. And so this is a snow drought year. This can have a big impact on mountain economies and tourism and the ski industry as well. So first off, let's get right to the point. Well, what is snow drought? And so simply put, it's a period of time when you have less snow on the ground than you should. And so there's a few different ways you can get to that less snow on the ground. And so one way is just having fewer storms. It's dry. This is kind of the more common drought that we think of. And so that's the reason why there's a lack of snow. But the reason we've been more interested in is where you actually still have plenty of precipitation coming out of the sky. There's plenty of storms, but the temperatures are too warm to snow, even high up in the mountains. And so this warm snow drought is what we've really been focusing on, and what that can mean for things like water resource management under climate change. And so in terms of water resource management, one of the biggest things that is going to change, not necessarily the amount of water, so precipitation, the amount of precipitation throughout the year might not actually change that much, but it's really the timing of when that precipitation comes off of the mountains and into our streams, and then eventually into our reservoirs. And so a lot of the Western US reservoirs were developed with this model where they leave room in the reservoir to fill in the winter to manage floods if they need to release water throughout the winter, and then kind of slowly fill up in the spring and summer. And then you have that reservoir for public use or agriculture or whatever you need the water for. But since with a warming climate, we're going to see more precipitation coming actually in the middle of the winter. So we're not going to be able to just release all that water through. And I think water resource managers are already having to deal with that and trying to figure out how to handle this. And so understanding snow droughts can hopefully help understand ways to manage things related to the timing of water coming into our reservoirs. And so I mentioned climate change already, but this is one of the things that's kind of really driving these warmer snow droughts. And we've experienced warming temperatures throughout the winter all year, but also especially throughout the winter time in the Western United States. And that's led to a decline in our snowpack. And so on the left here, we see changes in temperatures in the Sierra Nevada region from 1895 through 2020. And the red bars indicate warmer than average years. And we see this trend in much warmer years in the last 30 to 40 years. And then on the right, this is how the snowpack has changed over time on April 1st. And all the red circles indicate less than or less snowfall over time, and the blue circles indicate more snow over time. And the map is heavily dominated by the larger red circles, which indicate this declining snowpack. So getting back to the work that we did with our IRP project, so there's lots of tools out there already. When I say tools, I mean web tools like what we see here on the upper left to track things like temperature, precipitation, and also snowpack. But what isn't really out there yet is a tool that combines those elements and quantifies different types of snow drought. And if you're where you lie kind of on the snow drought spectrum throughout the year, not just on April 1st, but tracking this in real time. So with our IRP funding, our main goal of that project was to develop the initial version of our DRI-WRCC snow drought tracker. And I do want to mention that I do also work for the Western Regional Climate Center, which is housed at the Desert Research Institute, and it's a federally funded through NOAA. There's 6 of these throughout the United States, and we have one here housed at DRI. And we produce a lot of these types of climate tools. And so here's the website to our tool that was recently completed within the last year or so, the first version. And so really the backbone of this tool is our SNOTEL network, which is over 700 mountain weather stations in the Western US. And we also have Alaska. It's not shown on this map, but we have this data available for Alaska. And these weather stations, they measure snowfall, but also the amount of water that is within the snow, which is really important for water resources. And so with our tool, we have a real-time dashboard where we can look at the current conditions throughout the year. And this is updated daily, each day throughout the season. And then we also have historical data, so we can compare a current year to what it was like back to about 1980 or so when these stations first were implemented. But really one of the bigger innovations of our project was the development of this phase diagram to track these snow droughts. And so on the right here is our conceptual model of this phase diagram. And so it tracks snow water equivalent, or the amount of water in the snow, and precipitation at the same time. And so this diagram is available on our website to help interpret these phase diagrams. But the real important thing here is we can fall into one of these 4 quadrants. And so we have our bottom left, which is just your kind of dry drought, not a lot of precipitation, and then our warm snow drought, and then our quadrants when we're wet and snowy. And so this is just one example that I pulled up from the 2015 drought in the Sierra Nevada. This was one of the worst, if not the worst, snow drought in the historical record. And so you can see throughout the entire year, this goes from November to April, each dot is a day, and they're colored by month. And so almost the entire year we're in this lower quadrant, which is some type of drought. And we see in December here, these purple dots, we were actually in this warmer snow drought where we had actually plenty of precipitation, but it was too warm. And so our snowpack was still well below normal. And then it just turned to be really dry, and we wound up in this very dry section. And again, one of the worst snow droughts in our historical record. So since then, we've actually been working towards adding some things to the snow drought tracker and developing a new version. And part of this was we wrote a proposal to get funding from the National Weather Service. And so we just recently received that funding for 1 year. That just started a couple of months ago. So we're just getting going on this. And so the National Weather Service, they not only provide your 7-day forecast to you, but they also monitor floods and droughts. And we feel that there is potential that they can use this tool in their operations and their monitoring. And so what we're going to be doing is with weather service offices throughout the Western US, we're going to be showing them how to use the tool, the features of it, and then getting feedback from them on what they like, what they don't like, and new things that they might like to see, and try to develop a new or an updated version with these changes, and hopefully understand how they can better use this in their operations. And so we're still pursuing further research ideas around snow droughts and snow drought tracking. And so one of the things we're really interested in, and we're just starting to dig into a bit, is a forecast component to this snow drought tracker. And so what I showed you in our system, our snow drought tracker, is all based on the most recent observations and historical data. So there's no forecast or prediction component there. But what we can do is basically take our phase diagrams that I was showing you and tack on a sub-seasonal forecast that goes out 2 to 4 weeks and kind of can give you a sense as if there are storms or not storms in the forecast, how that could change where you're at in snow drought. You know, could one big storm really improve things? That sort of thing. So we're excited to work on the forecast component. And then also applying this, what we've done is for the Western US and Alaska, but there's a lot of potential to apply this to other parts of the US or around the globe. And snow is important around the world, of course. And one place we're interested in is the Northeast United States. And the main problem there is that they don't have the SNOTEL network. They don't have that observing network, the 700 stations that measure snow water equivalent. They hardly have any, in fact. And so we would have to, we're trying to understand if there's different data sources we could use for other parts of the country. This map here shows output from a hydrologic model to estimate snowpack. And so that's one option we could use. So we're exploring some of those options for the Northeast and other parts of the US. And we are just continuing to look for new grant opportunities to, extend our funding and be able to continue to work on this exciting project that's near and dear to me, and that's snow. And so I will leave it at that. And if there are time for questions, I will take any. Thank you.
All right. Hey, thanks, Dan. And we're going to skip questions for right now. We're about halfway through, but thank you for that. It's so interesting. I am intrigued to see how you might be able to apply some of this up to the Northeast, and whether or not you're going to need all the capital intensive investment in tracking devices, or you'll be able to predict without. All right, so from snow droughts, we now go into and by the way, for the audience, we're about halfway through. So we've got 2 more presentations. And so next, from snow droughts, we go to the chemistry behind snowfall, which is a very timely topic, considering we're going into the winter season. So Dr. Nathan Chellam is a postdoctoral fellow at the DRI Division of Hydrologic Sciences. So he's got his toes in the water. He has authored dozens of publications on this topic and related studies. Today, he'll present how using the chemistry of atmospheric river snowfall can improve water resource management in the Western US. So Dan, if I can turn it over to you. I'm sorry, Nathan.
Yeah. All right, thanks for the introduction. So let's see if I can share my screen here. All right, is that working? Cool. Can everybody see that? Tina, can you nod if you can see it? Good. All right. So thanks for tuning in, everybody. I'm excited to talk to you today about the IRP project I'm working on. I'm working on this project with two other researchers at DRI, Christine Albano and Joe McConnell. And the title of the presentation today is Using the Chemistry of Atmospheric River Snowfall to Improve Water Resource Management in the Western US. And so before we get started, I just wanted to give you an idea of what motivated me to get interested in putting this project together. And that was really the record winter we had in 2016 to 2017. So this is the winter that really got the gears turning in my mind anyhow, about this idea for the project here. And the main reason was this was a humongous winter. We had tons of snow. Here are some pictures I took. I like to go up in the mountains and go skiing and snowshoeing. And here is a picture at Mount Rose, which is the ski resort just above Reno. It's Reno in the background in the valley there. And this is the ski sign that's normally designed to be way above the snowpack so you can see where you're going. It's like a 20 or 25 foot high sign. And this year it was almost completely buried by the snow. And then similarly, the road to the ski resort was looking a lot more like a snow tunnel than an actual road in this winter. And so this epic snowpack is what really got me thinking about this project. And one of the main reasons this was such a big winter was because there was an unusually high number of atmospheric river storms. So an atmospheric river is a specific type of winter storm that transports large amount of moisture from the tropics and the lower latitudes up into Western North America. And so this image here on the right is an image showing water vapor in the atmosphere with brighter colors representing more water. And the atmospheric river is this narrow band of bright green in the atmosphere, swooping up from the tropics and hitting the west coast of California, and in this case, making up into the Sierras. And so this is a storm that was from that 2017 winter. This is from January 2017. It's a storm I'll come back to a few times throughout this talk. But I just wanted to give you an idea of what kind of storm made this winter so special. And so winter storms, other types of winter storms can come from different locations. They can come out of the Pacific, the Gulf of Alaska, from northern North America. But this atmospheric river is a really specific type of storm characterized by this narrow band of moisture coming up from the tropics. And just to kind of drive that home, and so you can see how dynamic the atmosphere is, this is an animation of the water vapor in the atmosphere for the days leading up to this storm event. And so this will help you really see what the atmospheric river, what they mean by atmospheric river. And so here, this is January 4th, 5th, and now we're going up into the storm. And when it coalesces into this narrow band of water, that is the storm event itself, that narrow limb of moisture that is moving a bunch of water from the tropics. It's eventually falling as rain and snow in California and the Sierra. So that is the type of storm that I'll be talking about here. And that 2016 to 2017 winter was special in that in a normal winter, we have between 10 and 30 days where there's landfalling atmospheric rivers on the west coast of North America. In the winter of 2016 to 2017, there were 50 days with atmospheric river storms hitting the US. And so that's anywhere between 2 and 5 times as many as a normal winter, which led to a humongous snowpack. And so this figure on the left here is from the National Weather Service, and it is showing the accumulated precipitation throughout the year, starting in October, so it's going through the winter. And in dark blue here, we have the 2016 to 2017 winter, and that's comparing it to 3 other winters that had pretty major snowpacks. So the previous record holder, the 1982 to 83 winter in green, the 2005 to 2006 winter in red, and the 2010 to 2011 in light blue there. And then way down at the bottom, kind of that shaded teal region is what we would see, the precipitation we would see in an average winter. So you can just see that that 2016 to 2017 winter just went crazy, especially in January and February. And that was largely because of the high number of atmospheric river storms hitting California that year. And so this winter was the perfect example of the contrasting nature of atmospheric rivers. So as we all know, water is a precious resource out here in the West, and having a lot of it build up in wintertime is crucial for the water supply. So this winter actually ended a big drought that had been gripping California and the Western US. But this definitely comes at a cost when you have a winter with this much precipitation, and that would be tons of infrastructure damage. So to show what I mean, I think Dan set this up nicely. We're talking about snow supply in the mountains is crucial for water supply in the Western US. And so in the winter, you have the snowpack building up in the mountains, and as that snow melts throughout the spring and summer, that is the water that feeds reservoirs, streams, replenishes groundwater that we all use throughout the summer, while there's absolutely no precipitation out here in the Sierras. And so in a typical winter, atmospheric river storms typically supply between 30 and 40% of the snowpack. And so that's a very big component of the water supply. So understanding these storms a little better would be crucial for being able to inform decisions about how water supply has changed and might change in the future. But when you get these really powerful storm events, like the one that I showed you from January 2017, you can have severe infrastructure damage. So this is downtown Reno in the top left with the Truckee River approaching flood stage during that storm. They've got the bulldozers parked on top of the bridge to pull out any logs that might get stuck under the bridge. And then in California, that storm and the series of storms that winter wiped out Highway 1 along the California coast. So it wiped out a bridge and caused a massive landslide that closed the highway for months. And then one of the events making headlines that winter was the failure of the Oroville Dam spillway. So they had so much water coming in and they were releasing so much water from the dam, the spillway failed, and they were worried it would threaten the structural integrity of the dam itself, which ended up not, thank goodness. But yeah, these atmospheric rivers caused billions of dollars of damage that year. But on the plus side, they ended the drought. So our project is one small subsection of atmospheric river science, and it has a very specific objective, that is to study the chemistry of the snow throughout this upcoming winter and couple the chemical measurements we make to the meteorology of the storm to assess how specific storm characteristics affect the chemistry of the snow they deposit. So each time it snows, I'll run up into the mountains, grab some snow samples, and then link the snow that I've collected directly to the storm that deposited it using meteorology, weather maps, and whatnot. And so we're going to be looking at things like where the storm came from, the path it took to reach the Sierras, the temperature of the snow, and the amount of snow that fell, to specifically see if we can distinguish atmospheric river snowfall, chemically distinguish atmospheric river snowfall from other types of winter storms. So looking solely at the chemistry to see if we can identify a specific type of storm event. So just to walk you through what that might look like and what factors could contribute to different chemistry for an atmospheric river. So I'll compare an atmospheric river, that same one I've been showing you from January 9th, 2017, to a typical winter storm. There's not such thing as a typical winter storm, it's just a storm that is not an atmospheric river. And I'll be showing you some data from a storm from last winter, from February 2019. And just overall, right off the bat, a couple of big picture differences between these storms. So for the atmospheric river, the storm temperature was about -4 degrees Celsius, and it deposited about 14 centimeters or 5.5 inches of snow water equivalent. So that means if you melted the entire snowpack that fell just from that one storm, you'd end up with 5.5 inches of water, which is a very significant storm. Compare that to the more typical or different non-atmospheric river winter storm. And that storm was a bit colder, so it was -8 degrees Celsius and deposited about half as much snow water equivalent, so 7 centimeters. So this right off the bat illustrates two major differences between these strong atmospheric river storms and a normal winter storm, which is that the atmospheric rivers are normally a little bit warmer and a little bit wetter than different winter storms. And then just looking at the big picture atmospheric setup for atmospheric river storms, these figures show cloud liquid water in the colors in the background, just so you can see where the storms are. And then on top of that, this red and gray arrow is showing kind of the atmospheric prevailing winds in the jet stream. And so for the atmospheric river, you can see this jet stream is really going from west to east, dropping even a little bit to the south, and then swooping up into the Western North America. And so it's bringing air and air parcels and moisture from these lower latitudes into Western North America. Whereas for the storm on February 9th, 2019, this jet stream is oriented completely differently. So the jet stream is coming directly out of the north and taking a hard turn across the US to the east. And so it's bringing completely different air parcels and moisture into the Sierras. And hopefully, we're hoping that that will have an impact on the chemistry we can actually measure in the snow. And just to kind of drive that home a little bit more, this again is showing atmospheric water vapor. And this is really what distinguishes the atmospheric river from other winter storms. You can see that really strong, large plume of moisture coming in from the tropics, hitting the western US in the atmospheric river event that is completely absent in the storm from February 2019. So what we're hoping that these factors all combine together to make the chemistry from atmospheric rivers unique from other winter snowpacks. And the goal is to determine if we can find a unique chemical signature of atmospheric rivers, In a big winter, like the 2016 to 2017 winter, where we have that really big snowpack it's really dominated by atmospheric river precipitation, that snowpack as a whole will have a very different chemistry from the average winter snowpack. And this could potentially be useful for historical reconstructions of atmospheric rivers. For example, these trees growing right out of the snowpack will use the water, the snowmelt, as they turn on and start to grow in the spring and summer. And maybe in a year like 2016 to 2017, where the snowpack is very different chemically than a normal year, when that tree grows that year and makes its growth ring, and the tree ring might preserve a different chemistry than from an average winter. So that's kind of where we're going with this project. And thanks for listening. And it seems like we're saving questions for the end, but I'm happy to take any then.
Thank you, Nathan. Yeah, we're going to save questions to the end, but sorry about that, guys. I think I just my view. Can you guys hear me? You can hear me, but you can't see me. Okay. There we go. Sorry about that, guys. So thank you, Nathan. So interesting. You know, it's just listening to you makes you realize just how connected every single atmospheric activity is related. The domino effects and cause and effects of every little thing that happens in our ecosystem. So thank you so much.
Thanks.
All right, for those of us who love dogs and share our lives with these loyal canines, it's not difficult to believe that they are answering the call of duty by lending their noses in advancing the science of canine odor detection, from criminal trials to accidental drownings. This is going to be, I'm so excited. I haven't seen your presentation yet, Dr. Cable, but I'm excited about this. So Dr. Cable is an expert in forensic detection and systems research, University of Nevada, Reno adjunct professor in forensic anthropology, and an auxiliary deputy with several county sheriff's offices in the state of Nevada. She also is a go-to resource to the state of California Governor's Office of Emergency Services. So with that, if I could turn it over to you, Dr. Mary Cable.
You bet. Let's see. All right. Well, thank you. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I'm just going to jump right in. Let's see if I would jump right in if I could make my thing advance. Here we go. All right. So I've been at Desert Research Institute for over 2 decades. And a lot of my career has been spent studying the capabilities of canines. And this small picture here in the middle is from one of those research projects. But as Tina mentioned, I also have a lot of very practical experience deploying detection dogs. And so all of these pictures are my own canines over the years. And you can see there's a whole variety of environments and things that dogs can do in service to the community. But I'm here today as a scientist. It's who I am at the core. And that's why that picture there of the research is in the middle. So I'm just going to give you a quick roadmap of where we're going to go in the next 8 minutes. I'm going to give you a real brief overview on how I came to study canines, the currently funded IRP project, which I do need to acknowledge, and I'm very grateful for my collaborators here at DRI, Andre Klistov and Yang-Kwan Song. And then I'm going to outline just real briefly some of the additional research areas that I think really deserve some study. That's best practices and reliability of canines, drowning victim recovery, and finding clandestine graves. So most of my research over the years for canines has been funded by Department of Defense. And I've been really fortunate that they've sent me around the world to engage with other researchers and speak about my own research. And one of the very fascinating places that I was sent was to a facility in Tanzania where they train and deploy pouched rats to detect landmines. And a big part of our conversations in those meetings had to do with standards development for sniffer rats for landmines, because you can imagine the consequences if a rat were to miss a landmine would be absolutely dire. It would be loss of limb and certainly loss of life. So that got me to thinking about standards, and that was a part of what I was trying to work on with my own canine research programs. And when I looked within the United States, I found that I was actually really surprised to find that there wasn't a whole lot of science that went into canine training and testing and performance and optimization. And in fact, the National Research Council put out a report around 2009 that found there was not a whole lot of science at all in any of the forensic sciences. And canine detection is a forensic science. I then became more involved in the legal system, more of the law enforcement disciplines for canines. And I was again surprised to find out that courts were allowing canine evidence to be entered into court during trials that actually had little to no scientific basis. And so all of this was very curious to me, and I was deploying my own canine, working crime scenes and missing people cases. And so I started to look into this, and it turns out the primary reason that canine evidence can be admitted into court and is believed comes down to something called mythic infallibility. And that is simply defined as, or what it means is that people believe dogs. They believe that dogs are accurate, and they do so even when they're faced with looking at evidence to the contrary. And so mythic infallibility encompasses our belief in dogs. And it turns out if you are more scientifically minded, you are more likely to believe in the information that we get from dogs through their alerts or their trained final responses. And also, interestingly, there's a belief that canines adhere to science-based standards and that these standards are mandated. And it turns out that's not true. So that was a surprise. It maybe is a surprise to you. It was certainly a surprise to me. And so that was the impetus for putting in a proposal for these IRP seed grants that my colleagues and I are so happy and grateful to have received so that we can delve in. And what we were funded to do and what we are actively working on has to do with what we call residual odor. And we're looking specifically at residual odor from human remains, from what we call intact decedents or dead bodies. Residual odor has a formal definition, but what it really means is it's odor that remains after the target has been removed. And everybody has experienced residual odor at one point, many times probably over the course of your life. If you have walked into an elevator and you smell perfume or cologne and there's nobody in the elevator, that's residual odor. So what we're looking at with human remains is the scenario, for example, where someone has been killed and the perpetrator puts the body in the back of a trunk of a car and they drive someplace and dispose of the body. Can dogs come in and actually tell you that there was a body there? And can they do it accurately and reliably? Can all dogs do it? So that's really the basis for what we're looking at. Can canine teams reliably detect residual odor? But we are also putting another very rigorous approach to it with my colleagues here in the Division of Atmospheric Sciences, where we're taking it into the laboratory as well. And so we'll be comparing and contrasting how our canine teams do with what we can detect in the laboratory environment. And so we have a series of questions that we're excited to look at, that we're actively looking at, comparing how canines can do that are trained to do this, looking at their qualifications and is there a relationship between how they're trained and their certification and how well they do. And from the laboratory perspective, are we able to differentiate different compounds that come off of the residual odor samples that we are collecting? And I should mention that we're working in conjunction, we're collaborating with the medical examiner's office here in Washoe County. So that's what we're doing right now. Now I want to jump forward a little bit and talk about where this might take us and some of the other questions that are out there that are really in need of study. And let's think about law enforcement in a different perspective and talking about narcotics canines. And if you think about a dog that is doing a vehicle sniff on the side of the road, before they do their trained behavior, which would be a sit or a scratch, for example, they do some innate behaviors, which are simply, an innate behavior is just a natural, untrained behavior. You've seen that in your pet dog or your friend's pet dogs when they have something that they smell that they're really interested in. And so an example would be the dog closes its mouth and it tries to figure out where the source of that odor is coming from. So all dogs do these innate alert behaviors. The question is, do they do different innate behaviors when they encounter their target odor? And can the canine handlers actually differentiate those behaviors from their target odor, the narcotics, for example, from, oh, there's a tennis ball, or there's a cat in the car, another dog in the car? Right now, handlers are claiming that they can do this and that this does exist in court, but there's no science behind this. We actually don't know if there are odor-specific behaviors, and if there are, can we actually read those behaviors? And so that's something that really needs some study. I want to talk about strategic recovery of drowning victims. And every time I talk about this, people are surprised to learn that we actually deploy dogs to help us locate bodies in the water, in the subsurface environment that have drowned. And so, of course, we have Lake Tahoe very closely. It's the second deepest lake in the United States, next to Crater Lake. And sadly, we have a lot of drownings up there. Lake Tahoe is over 1,600 feet deep, and earlier this year, the dogs assisted in the recovery of our deepest recovery of a drowning victim ever at over 1,500 feet. So what we've observed, this is not from data, but what we've observed is that in relatively shallow water bodies, in a couple hundred feet or less, dogs can be very accurate and pinpoint, if you go down here, directly below me, this is where I'll find the body, you'll find the body. But in deeper water, hundreds to over 1,000 feet, they can get you into the area, but they're not exactly accurate. It's very difficult. And it makes sense because we don't know what happens to the scent as it is coming up through the water column. And so we need a lot of studies to figure out how we can make the dogs more accurate so that we can be more effective and efficient in doing these recoveries. And then lastly, really quickly, this is a really interesting study I'd love to get answers to. Dog handlers believe that trees can, or bushes or any vegetation can take up the scent of human remains and off-gas it through their leaves, and that dogs are able to detect it. And that's one way that could, if that were true, could help us locate clandestine graves, which are hidden, they're hard to find. And so any way that we can develop a tool or understand better how we can find these clandestine graves, people who are buried, who have befallen a terrible situation and are victims of homicide, that would go a long way towards being able to help us in the investigative component. So that was a lot of information. The main points that I was hoping to show you and convince you of is that we really do need rigorous science to move canine detection forward as one of the rigorous forensic science disciplines. There's a lot that we need to study, and the more we know, the better we can deploy these dogs to help us in our service. Thanks.
Thanks, Dr. Cable. That was fun. So it's interesting to learn that there's still, like you said, a lot more science and a lot more research, a lot more studies and proof that needs to undergo before we can really believe everything that we see on TV in those murder mystery shows. So, all right. Well, we have reached the end of our hour. I want to thank each of the scientists who presented their work. I know it's a lot of work to put together a presentation like this, but we really appreciate it because it helps get out the word that IRP, the Innovative Research Program administered through the foundation, is helping to fund some of these seedling ideas that just need a little bit of money, a little bit of resources to help kickstart them. Because I think in the end, they have the potential to have significant impact on our world. So with that, we'll say goodbye. We are going to post the website, and you are welcome to use that for questions. We had said we'd answer questions. We ran out of time, but you can pose your questions. We will get back to you. And again, want to thank you for spending an hour with us today on some very interesting science that's going on here in the state of Nevada. Thank you so much.